Ishiro Honda once said that the tragedy of monsters is the fact that they are born too tall, too strong, and too heavy. And at least in the context of the films, he was right. These attributes have led to Godzilla having many disagreements with the Japanese military. But at least in the context of pop culture, these attributes have led to the opposite for Godzilla. They've allowed him to prosper and produce 28 movies. But I want to analyze this and discover what it truly is about Godzilla that attracts people to him and why he's been so endearing. And the only way to truly do that successfully is to review every Godzilla movie ever made.
Some people might be angry, but regardless, welcome to Zazubar's Godzilla Palooza. Salutations, I am the controller of Godzilla Palooza, and you are now all state guests and hostages. No, but welcome back to Godzilla Palooza. It's day 7, it's been about a week since I started on this crazy adventure, and we've come quite a ways from the original Gojira, signified by today's movie. Today, I think we are in fact getting about as far away from the original Gojira as you could possibly imagine. The down-to-earth, gritty, nuclear holocaust allegory. Now, in the same franchise, we're on to the sixth film, technically, in the franchise, featuring laser guns, aliens, sci-fi technology, space travel, and monster-controlling technology. Yeah, we're pretty far from the original Gojira. Yet, strangely, we've got quite a few returning actors from that film. Well, actually only one, with Akira Takarada taking another leading role in the Godzilla franchise as Fuji. But we'll get into him in a minute. But yes, this is indeed about as far away from Gojira as I think, well, not as far as we're gonna get, but this is as far as I could possibly imagine without knowing the rest of the franchise. I mean, again, we've got space travel, we've got laser guns, we've got sci-fi technobabble, yet it's a Godzilla movie. And that just shows how diversified this character became and how much you could do with him and how much the filmmakers did with him. So I think that's interesting and makes this film very important for being the movie that changed the course of Godzilla films for a while. We'll get back to the down and gritty stuff in the next series, but for now, we're into some pretty crazy out there sci-fi stuff that the kids all enjoy. Well, I don't want to say kids because 60s moviegoers enjoy this stuff anyway. I mean, a year later we'll get the original Star Trek series, stuff like Lost in Space and, you know, all this stuff. So people were intrigued about space, and this film is definitely cashing in on that. And cashing in is not necessarily a bad thing. This film is definitely a really great sci-fi movie. I don't want to call it a great Godzilla movie because guess what? He doesn't have a lot of screen time. He's only in about 3 scenes, yeah. And all his 3 scenes are awesome, it's just that he's not the central aspect of the plot. It is mostly Ghidorah, or Ghidra in this film, Ghidra's movie, and I guess we can't be too picky about that because Godzilla's name isn't in the original Japanese title, Invasion of the Astro Monster, which is the film we're going to be reviewing today. I just realized I forgot to say that. Yes, we're reviewing Invasion of the Astro Monster from 1965, otherwise known in America as Godzilla vs. Monster Zero. I consider Monster Zero / Invasion of the Astro. I'm going to call it Invasion of the Astro Monster in this review just because that's the cut I watched for this review. I'll touch on the American version at the end of the review, but we'll call it the Invasion of the Astro Monster for the sake of this review. I consider, and I think I'm the only person on the planet who considers this, Mothra vs. Godzilla through Invasion of the Astro Monster a trilogy. And here's why. They are, in my opinion, the 3 most classic Godzilla films. Taking Godzilla from this badass destroyer to a hero of the planet. And this trilogy definitely encapsulates that, though it's a little clunkier than a trilogy might be if it was more focused on that. But it's definitely there, and these 3 films will establish, in each in their own way, establish the tone and the stories for the rest of the franchise. Mothra vs. Godzilla was the tone and storytelling. Ghidorah was the monster rumble. Monster Zero Invasion of the Astro Monster is the sci-fi stuff. The hardcore, out there sci-fi stuff with aliens controlling the monsters. And that's the big thing why I consider this a trilogy. But also, each film leads into the next. With Mothra vs. Godzilla, we have references to Mothra's fight with Godzilla in Ghidorah. With Ghidorah, we have references to the way Godzilla, Mothra, and mainly Godzilla and Rodan battling Ghidorah for the first time in Astro Monster by the Exilians, or Planet X people as they're called in this film. We'll get Exilians later, but right now we'll just call them people of the Planet X, or aliens, or whatever. And they reference the fact that Godzilla, Rodan, and Mothra, again, mainly Godzilla and Rodan, Mothra isn't mentioned, that they were able to defeat Ghidorah, and that they want to use them, but we'll get into that when we get into the plot synopsis. So, the big reason why I consider this a trilogy, and why I don't consider other films part of this particular story, is because each film leads into the next. And they're all, in my opinion, the 3 most classic Godzilla films, in that they establish a lot of stuff for future films. So I think they're important and deserve to be a trilogy for that reason. I don't know what to call them exactly. Maybe the Showa Godzilla trilogy. Yeah. I'm coining that term. This is the Showa Godzilla trilogy, and this is the end of it. With the Invasion of the Astro Monsters, it is a great, classic, epic film. And just like the other 2 films in this trilogy, it's great, but unlike the first film in this trilogy I'm considering, it's not amazing. Like, I consider Mothra vs. Godzilla to be one of the greatest Godzilla films ever made. Ghidorah not so much, and this I consider to be on the same grounds as Ghidorah. I really like this movie, but I don't love it. And we'll get into that in more detail, of course, but I just want to establish that from the outgo that I like this movie, I don't love it, and I don't watch it on a regular basis. I don't know why. It might just be because I'm not a fan of big, crazy space travel sci-fi stuff. I mean, I like it, and I like films that are about it, but I'm not crazy about it. And this film is rich with that, and that might be why I like it and don't love it. I'm not a big fan of either Star Trek or Star Wars, and this has that kind of feel to it. And I think that's ultimately why it's not one of my favorites. But again, I think it's great. I just don't have a profound love for it. And it's definitely classic. I'm not going to knock it for that. It's been parodied and copied in countless Godzilla films and parodies of Godzilla films. I'm remembering a Looney Tunes cartoon, which might have actually been before this, but I don't think so, which parodies the opening shot of this film. And they're going past all these planets that have letters of them, and they finally get to Planet X. It's funny. I think it's parodying this film. I could be wrong on that. Looney Tunes fans, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember that scene from Looney Tunes, and it was around the time of this film's release. And this was a very popular Godzilla film. And I think the big reason for that is because this movie was not only released in America and got a major release in America, but also was partially funded by American film producer Henry G. Saperstein, who will become integral in Toho's films around this time period, in that he kind of oversees the Japanese productions and sees if they can be marketed for American audiences. And he's a big part of Monster Zero's production, and actually contributed quite a bit of money to the film, and I think that's why the film looks so great. This is a beautiful movie. All the sets are really elaborate and all the shots are very wide-spanning and complex. There's a lot of double projection shots in this film like we have with Mothra vs. Godzilla. But in this one, it's not very dated. It's in fact very seamless. And I think that's just progression in the fact that they had a bigger budget. And this film, the production values are fantastic. It is on par with a lot of American sci-fi films of the period. And it just looks fantastic. But we'll get into the effects a little later. I just wanted to establish that this movie looks fantastic. So let's get into the plot of Invasion of the Astro Monster. Listen, as I've been doing with the past 2 reviews, I'm not going to go into as much detail as I was doing early in the series, but even less so here because this film is so rich with details. And not like the original Gojira where it's got a lot of running subplots, this movie just has a lot of stuff happen. Like a traditional sci-fi story, it's got a lot of complex plot elements that I'm not going to get into because they're not important to my review. Basically, it goes like this. An organization on Earth called the World Space Agency discovers a 13th satellite of Jupiter. It's a planet called the Planet X because it's a mystery and nothing is known about it. A small expedition team is sent, 2 people, is sent out to investigate the planet and see exactly what it is and if there's potentially any life on it because they've been getting strange radio signals from the planet. The 2 astronauts are sent out to Planet X. One is Fuji and the second is Glenn. One's an American and one's Japanese, though in either cut of the film, the English and Japanese, they both speak one language. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Strangely, this is one of the only Godzilla films where either way you're watching a dubbed performance. It's weird, but it works in both cuts. So, Fuji and Glenn arrive on Planet X and are surprised to see that it's basically a desert. There's nothing on it. It basically looks like you'd expect it to look. It's barren, lifeless, and is basically just a rock. But then, all of a sudden, Glenn disappears, and it turns out that he's been invited into the realms of the inhabitants of Planet X. Yes, indeed, there is life on this planet, and not only are they humanoids, but they're also far beyond scientifically the current state of Earth technology. They're just out there advanced. Very, it's kind of typical alien stuff, but it's the first time it's done in a Godzilla film, so it's still impressive. Fuji follows the trail of Glenn and ultimately ends up in the same predicament as Glenn is, being the guests of the Planet X people. The people of the Planet X, I don't want to call them Exilians because they're not called that in the movie, but I'm very tempted to. The people of the Planet X are led by a person named the controller of the Planet X, though in the Japanese cut he's referred to as the commandant. I'm going to call him the controller because that's just what I'm used to. I've only seen the Japanese cut 3 times, and I've seen the American cut many more times. So the commandant or the controller, I'm going to call him the controller, tells them that they have a major problem on the Planet X and explains to them why the planet is so barren because the space monster, Monster Zero, has been destroying their planet and has been terrorizing them, forcing them to live underground, and has destroyed the entire surface of the planet. The monster is, of course, actually Ghidra from the last film. And, of course, Glenn and Fuji recognize him. Of course, though, the Planet X people tell Fuji and Glenn that they don't give things names on Planet X, they give them numbers. And Ghidra is Monster Zero. And Godzilla and Rodan will get names later. So Fuji and Glenn have been given an offer by the Planet X people. The controller tells them that they need a way to get rid of Ghidra and that they can't seem to find a way. So he suggests to Fuji and Glenn that they bring Godzilla and Rodan to Planet X to fight Ghidra and keep him and basically scare him off, because the controller saw Godzilla and Rodan's fight with Ghidra on Earth the previous year and saw that they were able to thwart him. But Fuji and Glenn say there's no way we can get him here, but of course the Planet X people have a plan, and on Earth they enact a plan to bring Godzilla and Rodan to the Planet X by using flying saucers and some strange anti-gravitational technology, technobabble, what's it called, to bring Godzilla and Rodan to Planet X. Once there, Fuji, Glenn, and their superior, Dr. Sakurai, I thought the same thing, all go to Planet X to oversee the battle and just to be advisors to Godzilla and Rodan, because the Planet X people are not familiar with them. They witness the battle. Godzilla and Rodan both are able to thwart Ghidorah, which is a tad disappointing. I wish Ghidorah, Ghidra, was a little bit more... He's not as strong as you want him to be. I mean, it's just Godzilla and Rodan. I mean, it took Mothra, at least in the previous film, to fight him. I mean, in this film, he loses both battles he's in, which I find kind of disappointing, because he is kind of the main monster. So I find it disappointing that he loses both battles that he's in. I guess you wouldn't have any other way, because we have to have that plot twist in the middle of the film. I don't know. I wish he won at least one of the battles, but whatever. So Godzilla and Rodan thwart Ghidra. The controller of the Planet X thanks the Earthlings for their help and offers them, in return for their cooperation, the cure for cancer, apparently. So Fuji, Glenn, and Professor Sakurai all leave very happy that now they've come back with the cure for one of the most infamous diseases on Earth. But it turns out to be a trick, in that the controller has instead given them a tape declaring that the Planet X declares war on Earth, and if they do not surrender the Earth for colonization, that they will destroy it, with the help of three monsters: Ghidra, Godzilla, and Rodan, otherwise known as monsters 0, 02, and 01 and 02. Excuse me, it's very late at night. So the monsters are going on a rampage, and all under the control of the Planet X people. And the Earthlings come up with two connecting ways to stop the invasion. One is to gain control of the monsters again, so that way they won't have a device to destroy the Earth, by using, like, I forget what it's called. I think it's called A-waves or something, or some kind of pulse that will knock out the electromagnetic waves that the Planet X people are using to control the monsters. And also, one of the main characters in the film, Tetsuo, has created an invention. He's also the love interest of Fuji's sister. Has created an invention that creates a high-pitched sound wave that can hurt the Planet X people. God damn it, I wish I could just call them Exilians, but damn it, they're not called that. So he devises a way to hurt the Planet X people, and they use both plans to win. The monsters are back under their own free will. The Planet X people are all killed by the sound waves, and now we have to come down, of course, to a monster fight. This fight is a little bit tacked on, since the main conflict of the film is over. All the Planet X people are gone, but of course now we have to deal with Ghidra, who is really not even the villain of the film. He's just kind of the pawn of the villain who's kind of left over. It's almost, I love the expression on his face once he's back under his own free will. He's kind of like, why am I back here? And then Godzilla just attacks him. And he's just like, oh my god, why are you here? It's funny, and I guess it's cool, but that last fight does feel a little tacked on, because it's just like, oh, now we have to deal with Ghidra. So Ghidra is again defeated by Godzilla and Rodan, who disappear into the ocean after they defeat Ghidra. And then we have a nice little wrap-up with Fuji and Glenn, both accepting Fuji's sister's love interest with Tetsuo, and then we have a nice little wrap-up. So this plot, god damn is it epic. I love this plot, and mainly it's just because I do like sci-fi. I'm ultimately not a huge fan of this kind of out there space travel, but it's just so epic. And ultimately, I like the plot better than the one in Ghidra, because the gravity of the world being in danger feels a lot more, it has a lot more weight to it than what we had in Ghidra. Like, I feel like the fact that the Planet X people have control over the monsters and have the ability to destroy the planet comes to the surface more in this film than it did in Ghidra. And by the end of the film, you really don't know how the Earthlings are going to get out of it. And you definitely are invested in seeing how they're going to get out of it and want to see them come through. But you definitely feel the presence and the fear caused by the Planet X people. And I feel like having legitimate, tangible villains with speakable motives in this film helps give the film a sense of urgency and danger that Ghidra didn't have, because it didn't have a villain with a voice. Now we have that. Sure, and also strangely enough, that gives Ghidorah a personality that he didn't have in the three-headed monster. In that, in Invasion of the Astro Monster, he has someone to speak for his motives, so when he's destroying stuff, he has more of a personality and has more of a villainous presence. So I like that. All the twists and turns of the film are great, if not a little callable, but when they do hit you, they come in like a knife. And the film's plot is ultimately very well constructed and well paced. There's not a moment in this film that drags, and that's also because the human characters are so great. There are some plot holes though. Like the big one that strikes out to me is how the hell did the Planet X people gain control over Ghidorah, and where did they get him? Sure, at the end of the three-headed monster, Ghidorah was flying off into space, but I want to know how he got to the Planet X and how they got control over him. It just seems a little bit too coincidental to me, and it's not even kind of explained. They don't even acknowledge the fact that Ghidorah came from Earth to the Planet X. There's just that point in the film where they're just like, oh yeah, and we have control over Ghidorah. It's a little bit of a plot hole. It's not a huge problem because it ultimately doesn't really matter. Just the point is that they have control over Ghidorah, but it almost makes me wish that we got an original monster in this movie rather than a repeater. Like we got a new monster created by the Planet X people to attack Earth, but I actually like this appearance by Ghidorah better than his original one because again, he has more of a personality. And I'm gonna go this far. I love Ghidorah the three-headed monster, but I'm gonna go this far. I wish this was his first appearance rather than the three-headed monster. I feel like he has more of a personality and more danger surrounding him than he did in the three-headed monster. So I wish this was his first appearance, and then not only would the plot make more sense, but also, I don't know, I feel like this is a better appearance by him and he has more of a personality. The last thing I want to say about the plot is that the build-up to getting on the Planet X has fantastic atmosphere. All the shots in space and between the astronauts and all these slow walking around and intrigue scenes of finding out about the Planet X and about all the mysteries surrounding the people there are all well shot, and it creates an atmosphere that is very creepy and very sci-fi, and it's this kind of sci-fi I like. It's kind of like the original Alien, but not as dark. It does definitely remind me of that though, because the atmosphere surrounding those opening scenes is so very tangible. But again, it's not as dark. I love this plot. It's very epic. I love how much danger the world is in at the end. And I think the slow atmosphere of the beginning builds up great to the fast-paced, action-packed stuff happening in the second half. So I love that. So that'll bring me to the human characters / actors. I love them. I love Akira Takarada as Fuji. I love Nick Adams as Glenn. They have great buddy chemistry. And they're easily my two favorite dual protagonists in all of Godzilla film history. I love the way they talk to each other, and it's very witty banter and well-written banter. In both cuts, I mean, you get Akira Takarada's performance in the Japanese cut, and you get Nick Adams' performance in the American cut. I say you have to watch both to get the full effect of it, but whatever. You get the chemistry and the bond between the two in both cuts. I'm gonna go this far. I think the human characters are the best part of Invasion of the Astro Monster. I know, right? I mean, this is a Godzilla film. You'd think that the monsters would be the best part. But as I said when I talked about this movie in the intro, they don't have a lot of screen time. And the human characters are ultimately the ones who get the plot going and keep the plot moving. The monsters are at the mercy of aliens here. They're not the ones advancing the story, the humans are. And thank God they're so likable and fun to watch and so well written. Otherwise, this movie would be painfully boring and hard to sit through. But they really are kind of the best part and keep the movie going at a good pace and keep you entertained while there's not a lot of monster stuff going on. So props to the film for that. Though my ultimate problem with this film is that the monsters don't have too much screen time, and ultimately that's why I'm watching the film, because I'm a Godzilla fan and I want to see him on screen. So I'm ultimately disappointed that he doesn't have a lot of screen time, but thank God at least we have good human characters to support them not having a lot of screen time. And the acting is quite good. Akira Takarada is of course a great leading man, so he's perfect as Fuji. I love how he's this overprotective brother. He is this very, like, old-fashioned Japanese man living in a futuristic world where all this stuff is kind of out of place, and that there's all this, you know, sci-fi stuff going on. All this very Americanized Japanese culture going on, which I like. And I love that conflict and the fact that he's likable, but he has his faults to him, and I like that about him. Glenn is awesome. He's very likable, and Nick Adams has this great charm about him. So does Akira Takarada, but Nick Adams has this very Americanized, smooth kind of talking way about him that works great, especially in comparison to Akira Takarada's sternness. And that's ultimately why they have such great banter. Again, you have to watch the American cut to get the full scale of Nick Adams' performance, but the guy who dubs him in Invasion of the Astro Monster is definitely good. The full scope of his performance, I say watch Godzilla vs. Monster Zero. I love the human characters. They're definitely the best part of the movie. I know that sounds weird. We are reviewing a Godzilla movie, but it's true. They are, in fact, the best part of the movie. And keep the film moving. I love the tension and conflicts between the character. There are two scenes that stick out to me. And it's all because of how well acted and written the human characters are. I love the scene in the restaurant or hotel or whatever where Fuji, Glenn, Fuji's sister, and Tetsuo are at a table and eating lunch and having coffee. And the whole point of the scene is that Tetsuo wants to marry Fuji's sister, but Fuji isn't impressed with him, so it's in kind of a suitor kind of way. He doesn't want them to get married, and he's waiting for Tetsuo to come up with some way for him to be impressed by him, so that way he'll give his permission for the two to get married. And there's this great shot where Fuji's sister and Glenn both walk off to go do something, and Fuji and Tetsuo are both left at the table together, and there's this great awkward couple of shots, and both of them play it off so well. So I love that tension. The other one is actually a little bit more of a tense scene where Fuji and Glenn go wandering around the Planet X complex their second time going back to watch Godzilla and Rodan fight Ghidorah, and they're caught by the Planet X people. I want to say fucking Exilians, damn it. And because they're state guests, the Planet X people and the controller are offended by this. And there's this great scene where they're talking about how if they were members of the Planet X race, they would be killed. It's very tense, and you're waiting for them you're waiting for the scene to come back down from that climax, and it's great. It's very well written, and the way Honda shoots it is great too. When they're being tried before the controller, everything around them is dark except for this one light spot that they're in. It comes off as kind of an interrogation room kind of feel. And then once the levity of the situation comes back and, you know, they're just like, oh, but you guys are guests, so I can't punish you, the light comes back on. It's great shooting and very well written. I want to talk about the controller of the Planet X because he's awesome. I don't know the actor that plays him, but he's awesome and one of my favorite Godzilla villains. And just the motions he makes with his hands, they're very robotic. And I think that works for the film because the whole point of the villains is the fact that they lose to the Earthlings because they depend too much on computers to run their lives. And they base their entire culture off one computer's programming. So I like that he has these robotic and computerized and almost planned ahead of time movements. It's very well done. So he's one of the best performances in the films and really sells it as a villain and sells the Planet X people as being threatening. They're in fact my favorite alien race of Godzilla villains. The Kilaaks that we'll get later in Destroy All Monsters are okay, but they're not this threatening. And it's ultimately the performances and the robotic performance that sells it. That's really all I have to say about the human characters. I love them. They sell the movie and keep it moving at a good pace. And it's good that they're awesome because, again, they're the thing that drives the plot. The monsters aren't because they're under mind control. So I like that they're good at driving the story. So let's get into the theme and allegory of Invasion of the Astro Monster. The film is a lot more focused on the sci-fi story than it is on allegory and themes, but there is definitely something there. I think really Honda's point with this, if he has a point, there might be a little bit of overanalyzing in this review, so I apologize for that ahead of time, but I feel like there's something there just knowing Honda. There's a little bit of loathing for duplicity in international relations going on here, in that the Planet X people say that they want peace, but they also want power and control over Earth. So when they come with peace and there's definitely duplicity in them, I feel like Honda doesn't want you to sympathize with them regardless of their situation about the water. He wants you to loathe them because they come with fake peace. And Honda is a diehard pacifist and doesn't like war and doesn't like, international conflict. So I feel like when we've got a different planet and race offering peace, he's showing the anger and hurt of the situation by making them the villains and by having them die so brutally at the end. Their death scene is long and painful. So I feel like Honda did that on purpose. And he shows a definite loathing for the international relations thing. So aside from that, though, I think the theme of the film is a little bit predictable and not so much developed and is kind of obvious of free will and desire versus what's expected of you and forced upon you. And there's a couple of examples of that. With the human cast, we get Fuji not approving of the marriage of Tetsuo and his sister, in that his sister and Tetsuo both love each other, but Fuji, being a traditional Japanese man, doesn't think that Tetsuo has done anything and doesn't have a spine to marry his sister. But they have love for each other, and that's proven in a couple of scenes where it's them alone that they have definite affection and love for each other, but Fuji doesn't want them to get married because he wants what's best for his sister. Not what's emotionally best for her, what's you're gonna have a successful life best for her. And I like that about it because I also like how it's parallel with a couple of other things in the film. One is also the way the Planet X people's race is based upon a computer, in that everything they do must be approved by the computer and is all calculated and planned ahead of time. The big thing is a Planet X woman, I think her name is Nakiwara? Yeah, I think her name is Nakiwara, and Glenn falling in love with each other, but the computer doesn't want them to get married. So when the Planet X people start to take control of Earth, and they refuse to stop falling in love with each other, she's killed, and it's ultimately just because the Planet X people don't want free will because it threatens their programming. So I like that, and then it's a little bit parallel with the Fuji story. So I like that, and it definitely, the film does definitely work on multiple levels, perhaps not as well as Mothra vs. Godzilla. And ultimately the sci-fi story does like kind of overbear the theme, and I don't love that, but I like the attempt, and I think the theme does come through in the end. I just wish that Glenn showed more depression and anger over Nakiwara's death. Oh no, her name is Namikara, excuse me. Namikara's death. And I don't love that he just kind of gets over really quickly and goes back to being buddy-buddy with Fuji. Because she didn't condone her Planet X people's actions. She was in fact angry about them conquering Earth. But, so when she dies, I feel like Glenn wouldn't be angry with her for being a Planet X, a Planet X person. I just feel like, he doesn't show enough depression and remorse for what happens to Namikara. So I don't love that about it. The final aspect, and this is maybe a little bit reaching, so excuse me, but is the monsters, in that Godzilla, Rodan, and Ghidorah are all under the control of an alien race and aren't given free will. They're just told what to do, and then they get relinquished by the Earthlings. I feel like that's the most obvious thing, and is just an aspect of the sci-fi story, but I do feel like it fits into the theme and is a good way of paralleling the human and monsters stories. So it may be obvious, but it works. So I like that about it. Ultimately, the theme and allegory is not the most important aspect of the film. It's more of the sci-fi story, action, and human drama. So it's not the most important aspect, and I like it when it is in a Godzilla film, so that's also part of why this isn't one of my favorites, but I respect it, and I like the theme. I just wish it was more integral to the story. But it does work, the plot does work on more than one level, leaving room for the theme, so I like that. So with all that said about the theme and allegory, let's get into the monsters themselves. We'll talk about Ghidorah first, since I think he is the main monster in this, despite this being a Godzilla movie. Ghidorah gets a lot more of a personality in this film, as I was saying earlier, than he did in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. And I think the reason for that is because, again, we've got villains who are speaking for his motivations. Even though he is under mind control, they ultimately do kind of use him for his purpose, in that he's being used to destroy a planet, which he was doing in Ghidorah of his own free volition anyway. So I think he gets more of a personality because we have people with voices speaking for his motives. Also, he has more screen time. He's the first monster to show up in the film and has the most screen time of the three monsters, so I feel like he gets more to do and more of a personality for that reason. Also, I feel like this movie is important for him because this is the first time where he's under mind control in a Godzilla movie, and in every subsequent appearance after this, he's gonna be well, not everyone, but most of them, he's gonna be under mind control, and this will become the status quo for him. And this also sets up his future personality and presence. So it's an important movie for Ghidorah, in that it sets up the status quo for him. Let's talk about Godzilla and Rodan together because they don't have any screen time apart. So not much of a characterization for Godzilla in this movie, which I find disappointing, in that he is very much so just a monster to be used for destruction and fighting in this film, and I don't love that. He does have a distinct personality, but only because we've seen the previous films, and ultimately him and Rodan are very much so kind of meshed together in the same pot in this film, and I don't love that. So I wish they got more of a distinct personality. They don't have any screen time apart, and ultimately I feel like that's just the fact that this isn't really a Godzilla movie. But since the American version does have his name in it, I think that becomes a problem there. So I don't like Godzilla's lack of a characterization in this film. It bugs me, and ultimately that's also why it's not one of my favorites, but whatever. The sci-fi story is good, so I feel like this isn't an enormous problem. But again, I don't like the fact that Godzilla is just kind of meshed in with another monster. So let's go on to the effects. They're awesome. You can tell Sabraya had more time and money to do this because all the military stuff and the sci-fi stuff is so intricately woven and constructed and moves so well that it just looks awesome and is fun to watch. I love the destruction scene towards the end of the film where Godzilla, Rodan, and Ghidorah are all attacking Japan at the same time. It's awesome, fun to watch, and I was glued to the screen watching it. I love all the stuff with the military. I love the stuff of Godzilla destroying and Rodan destroying the towns, and I love the stuff of Ghidorah destroying the cities. Sabraya is also at some of his best work here. My only problem with the effects, and this is more about the story, but that last fight scene is a little bit too similar to what we had in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. The only difference is that Godzilla is using his atomic breath. It's just nothing special, and it's not very memorable, and is ultimately too similar to the fight we had in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. But it's good. It's a little similar to the one we had last time. So I don't have a ton to say about the effects. I think that I think they're great. Just they're not. And some of Sabraya's most intricate and unique work, I just feel like the scene, the last fight scene isn't quite memorable. So that'll about do it for this review of Invasion of the Astro Monster. I didn't have a ton to say about it, as you'll find. It's not one of my favorite Godzilla films. I don't watch it regularly. I like it. I don't love it. Kind of like how I felt about Ghidorah, but I watched Ghidorah more than I watched this. But ultimately, I do kind of find myself liking it more than Ghidorah watching it again. So I really like Invasion of the Astro Monster. I think it's well made. I love this. I love the story. I think it's probably one of the best Godzilla over-the-top sci-fi movies. And probably is my favorite alien invasion Godzilla film, in that you really feel the gravity and the weight of the situation, unlike we had with Ghidorah, and unlike we'll get with later films. I feel like the alien invasion is great. The big disappointing thing for me is the lack of Godzilla screen time and the lack of a characterization for him. I just wish that he had more separately to do from Rodan. He is very much so looped in with Rodan in this movie, so I don't love that. And it does make this movie a little bit disappointing for me, and that's also why I don't watch it that much. The big thing about why this movie is awesome is the human characters, the effects, and the sci-fi story. That's all great. And the acting is fantastic. So with all that said, I do like this movie. I don't love it, so that'll bring us to rating. I'm gonna give this movie the same score I gave Ghidorah. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. It's a great movie, just it's not, I don't love it. Again, I do think that you should watch it if you're watching all the Godzilla films. I think it's a must watch for that, because it's an important film, and that this is the first movie where we've got monster mind control and an out there sci-fi Godzilla story. So it's important, but not awesome. I think it's good, but not great. So I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. I recommend it to Godzilla fans. I say go check it out, but it's not the greatest thing ever. So 4 out of 5 for me. So that'll about do it for this review of Invasion of the Astro Monster. So thank you very much for watching. Tomorrow we're gonna get into one of my least favorite Godzilla films. Yeah, I'm not gonna make any secrets about this one. Tomorrow we're gonna be getting into Godzilla versus the Sea Monster, otherwise known as Ebirah Horror of the Deep. So thank you very much for watching this edition of Godzilla Palooza. I'll see you tomorrow for that review. Sayonara.